it's a pleasant good evening to you all. Welcome back to our live coverage of the 2016 Tata Steel Chess Festival. And one game that we haven't seen in a while has exploded between Shak Mamidarov and Oyifan. In this crucial position at move 34, we've just seen knight d2 to b3. Ho Yifan decided it was time for her to make her break with c7, c6. My first impression was that this was mistimed, and I had expected her to try to keep the position with rook b8 to a8, just protecting this pawn on a5. Instead, she ventured into this forced tactical skirmish. After capturing on c6, takes on a5, and all kinds of crazy things were happening. Robin Van Kampen is about to join us, having got himself a cup of tea. Robin, come and sit down. Join us. I'm just looking at this game of Shak Mamidarov.
Yes, I was just looking at it as well.
Exactly, and we see this break at this move 34, and it seems that it was mistimed, and after knight takes, all kinds of complications with rooks and pieces are all hanging after knight takes a4.
From what I understood, this move knight takes a4 fell to a very nice trap, he said. But actually, if black would have found this brilliant move, just playing bishop to e8 back, planning to take back on a4 with the knight, apparently he's doing all right. But I have no idea why exactly.
Okay. So maybe a blunder is what you're saying.
Yeah, and we'll see how this happened exactly, because in this position, knight takes c3 was played.
Right.
And it looks like e2 is hanging. But at the same time, black can't take on b8, right? Because knight takes c6 check, picks up both the rook and the knight, and the bishop, sorry. And now this very pretty move, just removing the bishop, but also forcing black to actually take on b8 was played with bishop to g4. This is a very strange tactic, actually.
I'm still trying to get the zen of it. So after rook c7?
Rook c7, I think there is knight to a6.
Oh, nasty.
Nasty, yeah.
Oh, that is quite nasty indeed. So what happened was f5 was forced.
And now we are actually seeing just a mass exchange of pieces, and white is left with a winning position.
Wow. So he's got a pawn in hand, and this guy on g5 is essentially undefendable. Once the knight comes to e4, we'll see a trade in an f3,
exactly,
and then it will be all over.
So, but what I find very odd about this is that as white, especially, okay, maybe it was his strategy. It worked out for him, so he can't
keep an edge, a positional.
But I would try, like I said, I would try to do anything in order to prevent black from playing c6. Now maybe Shak actually thought that rook a8 is pretty much forced here. That's very possible. But it's interesting because I still thought that white is much better in a way, because black just can't really move. But the way it happened is very quick, because black is so solid here. And that's kind of a pity for Hu Yivan, who, she set up a very good defensive position. Apparently, around this point, she can equalize, but she has to make sure that she doesn't fall for this trap with knight takes a4, right? But let's have a look at that move, bishop e8, which was apparently the move that could have saved her.
The position feels like there should be something, but
I am not entirely sure, because where is it going to come from? I want to just take on a4, and you can't actually put more pressure on b6, because, like you're pointing out, the knight on c5 has to be protected.
Right. So if I do something awkward like
I
this
think
one?
I can just take on a4 twice, can't I?
Because you're not worried about any rook checks.
I will move my king to probably f6 or e6, and
You'll
it
be
has to be
perfectly
very,
happy.
very direct. Otherwise, it's just an equal position.
Wow. So just a one. This was the key moment.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez. And gosh, chess sometimes can be very cruel game,
Very
right?
cruel,
You
yes.
know, like you lose concentration for just one move, and then 7 hours of efforts get wiped out by a single error.
That is pretty much describing what happened here for Hui Ivan, who missed once again.
Whoa.
Uncommon tactic, but still, well, Shak is very tricky. We all know that.
Yes.
Shak is very tricky. He may have blundered a piece in one of the games here, but don't underestimate him. He's a very, very gifted tactician, and we just saw it again.
No question. And somehow, well,
Looks
no.
like she's making some play happen, but once again, I think White is very precise, being able to play King F2 after Knight H2 check, right?
Right.
And just getting one of the knights. Looks like this will be over pretty soon to me.
Yeah. 2 pawns.
Yeah.
Speaking of 2 pawns, we still have the Luke Van Velde game. Oh, pardon me. I actually pulled up the wrong game. I apologize.
Luke, who has not resigned yet. But I don't see anything happening over here.
No. Well, it's 2 pawns, and soon it might be a third, thanks to queen takes g5. Pardon me. Sorry. Queen takes g5. And it appears the game has actually been finished.
It looks
King G.
well. None of the players
Neither
are paying attention to the game. Luke now got back to the board, and so did Anish.
King
And
g6.
maybe we're gonna see a handshake.
It sure feels that a handshake is imminent in this game. Let's go back to the game between our pre-round tournament leaders. That was the game of
Caruana against Liren Ding.
and just a second.
Still very much going on this game.
We left it about these parts.
Oh,
And we were expecting queen d7, I think.
yeah.
So
And I
rooks-
actually thought that was pretty much. I mean, I remember looking at this and thinking it's just the only proper defense against the idea with rook b3. So I'm kind of not sure what is the idea now, because, like you said, the pawn on d3 and also potentially the pawn on h5 are both.
So
hanging,
let's see
right?
queen c7, because of course I want to. Oops.
That must be the idea. Yeah.
Right.
But rook e takes d3 doesn't matter because I'm getting
Back ranked.
back ranked without having the space on h2 for the king. So
Queen c7.
So is it just rook b1 then?
Rook b1. Yeah, sure.
At least you can take on a5 now.
Yeah, and in this case, when I do take on a5,
You can't
I'm
take-
keeping you honest. You're not. This is.
Marginal, right? This should normally be holdable. Perhaps you can even go as far as just playing.
I remember.
Can you play rook to c5 here or no?
I remember a game, Magnus Carlsen versus Vichy Anand, where you got this same queen and rook, and
Yes.
this doubled F on,
It
right?
was the
World Championship.
second match game or third match game. Something like
Yeah, some World Championship match game where Magnus won in a very nice way.
that. It was the first match game, and after that he lost the second one directly. Isn't that what happened?
Yeah, this was from Chennai.
Chennai, I think.
Yeah, so we're thinking, and well, rook b1. It's funny moment somehow. just boldly pointing out the obvious that we can't do it in this way because h2 is protected. Oops, covered, pardon me. So this is the current position.
Okay, and what about queen to c7? Did we try queen takes h5 now? I know it looks very dangerous, but
queen takes h5, check, rook d1, d2, yes?
Or I don't know, maybe queen c2 was also an option.
In the air. Well, queen c2, if I take the rook, then you've got to.
At least I have the queen f4 check
yes,
idea.
that is a little bit annoying.
Working for the first time.
Yeah.
Or at least I can take on f2, I guess.
I've got some threat here. Just
Actually, I don't have a perpetual check yet.
not yet. You probably want to avoid this.
This is what looks like. Anish has won the game against Luke with black, so Anish now moving up in the standings to plus one. Good day for him.
Very good day.
Yeah.
Recovering some rating points and playing a very nice game. More than that.
Yeah.
And again, not so much as a wonderful victory, but well, Luke is going to be berating himself for this knight b5.
Yeah, for the many knight moves that he made today.
Very good. During our break, I noticed that the computer engines felt that the game of Wee versus Wesley So was even, whereas I thought, well, it was still a plus.
G4, wow.
Until I saw this move G4. Why did just the last few moves so I can get? We saw this, this, check. Back. King, rook down. Any particular reason that you can spot why he hasn't played king h5 to try to, worm his way in to the position?
To h4.
Yeah.
Well, what happens if I go a king to d5 here?
Yes. King up.
And king e4.
Yes.
Are you gonna get me in Zugzwang now? Rook a2, king f3, rook c2. And it looks like we have Mamajarov who just won against Hu Ivan that position with the 2 pawns up. Like we said, there was not much left for black to do, and she resigned.
So 2 pawns still count for something in this game. And Anish's favor as well as Mamidara's favor. You were mentioning that in this particular case,
it
you
looks
getting
like
yours,
Zugzwang.
it feels like Zugzwang.
But rook d6 might be, it's at least threatening mate, let's put it that way.
So check, and it still threatens mate.
But, I mean, you are picking up the b-pawn, it looks like.
Well, still something to play for, no question about it.
Yeah.
And let me get an update on the game. Again, we are following. He didn't go for this king to h4 circular maneuver.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question, Yasser. Why not?
G4.
Yeah, this move.
Wow.
I would be very reluctant to play a move like this.
For very good reasons.
Yeah.
And after g4, king f6, we have this position on our board. Well,
just a general question, Yasser, because I can honestly say that I'm sort of from the same generation as these guys, and I can also admit that my rook ending is not the strongest point in my game, but I do have the feeling that Wesley's very good at them. Do you think that? Because I have the feeling that most players of my generations don't really sit down with the Dvoretsky manual or with the old books, let's say the encyclopedias of the endgames, and study them.
As perhaps they should.
As perhaps we should, let's say.
Yes.
Do you think that because of that, let's say guys like Wei Yi of their age are particularly weak in endings? Because you're commentating on a lot of games.
Right. Weak is always a strong word. I'm not going to say that they're necessarily at fault, again, because In the old days, when you take a look at the games of Vasily Smyslov, Akiba Rubinstein, Viktor Korchnoi, these were the three greatest rook and pawn endgame players of ever.
Mm-hmm.
They played with the Germans.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, look, they stopped and they could calculate and for hours and hours, and they played their Germans exceptionally well. The players of today have to play from the opening move to the very finish.
It's one short game in a way compared to
Right. I mean, Fabiano is kind of unlucky that that rook ending that he played with Anish the other day wasn't adjourned. Then Vladimir Tukmakov could happily explain why the position was lost, right? So weak is strong is what I meant to say. That from the practical point of view, where do you spend your time? Do you spend it on the openings and stuff like that? Sure, everybody would like to say that I need to improve my rook endings, right? It's a very simple thing to say. It's not so easy to do, because when you study rook and pawn end games, you really want to have skin in the game, right? And when you had an adjournment, boy, did you have skin in the game. You really wanted to understand what was going on. So I want to say that what really is extraordinary for me is how well these guys play after 5-6 hours of intense concentration, and they find these great moves. And I remember there's a game with Vladimir Kramnik where he made this maneuver. He was with this rook. He somehow saved what completely lost position, like with this rook coming from behind. And that was just sheer genius.
Mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. I'm told that we've had a repetition, actually, after G4.
Yasser, this once again proves how I have the feeling this is not my niche. I thought that after G4, Black would suddenly get a lot more ideas, especially relating to like rook to E3 if the king doesn't come back very quickly, rook E1, rook E3, and now they're repeating the moves. Does that mean that maybe G4 was actually a very good move, stopping King H5?
Extraordinarily enough, I think it was, and I think it caught Wesley by surprise, actually, because you don't anticipate your opponent giving you a protected passed pawn, right? And like you say, okay, now after you've played G4, you've got to be worried that somehow bad things are going to happen to you when you go rook E1 to E3. But the king just comes back and just hangs around. You don't have time to play rook to G3. You don't have time to play rook E3.
What about King E6, for example?
King E6, for example. I guess I will
wait.
D6. Well, now I can jump.
Yeah, this is getting where White wants to take it. He wants to exchange those pawns. Yeah, it perhaps. So that means that King H5 was a very necessary move to make right before G4 was played.
Exactly.
Because it does look to me as well that it looks like Wesley is regretting not playing King H5 right now. But then again.
But this seemed like a very natural move to me.
This actually was a bit better for Black. If we tried to bring back the king now, we could end up in some sort of Zugzwang where we had to remove the rook from the third ranks, remember?
Right.
And that means that there was still something to fight for here, but perhaps now White has managed to get through the worst of his position.
We were just looking. I don't know, at something like this, but at least Wesley would have won a pawn. Let me just get an update of the game, because it seems like a repetition has been going on. So this game looks like a draw is about to be agreed.
Okay, Wesley actually has played King E6. I think that they repeated just once, so he's thinking. But, well, how can you still pose problems to White here, Yasser? I'm not sure.
Me either. You're way, these ideas are just not looking at all feasible. I mean, because the rook White will be very happy to trade rooks, come back with his king, and suddenly he's got H pawn. a G pawn running. So this looks like a draw, and Wesley, you could see him kind of like looking towards the audience and kind of like, I missed something. Yeah, he's having some regrets.
Well, the one thing is I do expect, of course I don't know what's going on in Wesley's mind, but I do expect him to think for a little bit longer because he has 1 hour and 20 minutes on the clock. It's extraordinary how much time, how much of a time advantage he has. Wei Yi only 20 minutes, just got some extra time I think on move 60. So, well, Wesley still has reason to try and find if there's anything to try and trick Wei Yi into making a mistake. There are some interesting other games going on in the B group, as I understood. There is my friend Benjamin Bok. Benji has a very sharp game against the American talent Sam Seirawan, and we can see that this is a very, very...
Afek had just shown us some problem where he promotes 2 pawns to a queen and wins. This almost looks problem-like. Benjamin with an extra rook, but look at these pawns. And...
oh, wow. So what we see is that White actually... I mean, White obviously wants the queen, and he has queen f8, but he is allowing this rook g3 check move, and hoping that after c3...
forced? Or is it? I think it's forced, yeah.
Let's assume it's forced. After c3, he is not getting checked. He's still promoting. He's attacking the queen on a5 as well, let's not forget.
This looks like a box, yeah?
Takes, queen a3. This has to be played,
yeah. What is going on here? First impressions of black is a favorite to get into some kind of a... what am I saying?
I think it's a straightforward draw, right? Isn't it?
Or is it a straightforward draw? Show me.
Just the line that you were going into.
King b5.
King b5, queen e5 looks forced.
Right.
King takes b4.
And
takes.
And you're in the square. Very good. Draw.
Running to f1, right?
Right.
As fast as we can.
As fast as we possibly can.
And I think... has this been played?
Let me check. Well, yes, c3. And
rook takes c3 actually is on the board, and queen a3. So we're seeing exactly what we just...
they're following us.
Calculated.
Now, can White do anything tricky-trappy? King c2. No, he's not escaping.
No, he is...
perpetuals. No.
More than anything, I think he's making life hard for himself, because queen f3 check followed by some sort of check on the e file.
Right, we'll pick up the e7 pawn,
and
then it might be winning. Yeah. Exactly. Wow. Okay, and let's turn to Fabiano Ding Laren. Okay, and is this
the very top one?
The very top one. There we go.
And
we have seen after rook c6, rook b1, and they're getting to the position that we...
Oh god, Yasser, I think we missed rook takes d3. I suggested here, and we didn't see that actually rook b8 check is also a very serious move here.
Ooh, we don't have our chance to... We're not in time to hide, because we're probably going to get mated after queen takes h5, right?
If not mated, we'll be able to exchange the queens and get into an ending with... well, I mean, at least there's king e7, queen e8 check, king d6, queen d8. If you want to play it very safe, right?
Right.
Although that only leads to a 3 against 2, right? It doesn't, because my king can go to e5. So you have to look for something a bit more, a bit stronger. But there are many options, obviously. So rook to d8. This looks totally lost, actually, doesn't it?
Yes. Now, especially with your king. So we erred with rook takes d3. Since rook takes d3 isn't possible,
that means that
White is going to keep. Well, he's going to keep the. First of all, he's going to keep the pawn at hand. You don't get to play the rook c5 maneuver that you mentioned.
And I'm winning another one.
But that's the issue. You're winning the pawn on h5. Oh my.
But then probably
Then you're
Ding
winning.
Liren has miscalculated. Maybe he has missed Rook B8 check. I'm not sure, but
When he
clearly
went for
something
Rook
went
C6,
wrong. Yeah.
When he went for Rook C6, Queen C7. Yeah. Oh boy. And this would be a huge win for Fabi, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Not only taking care of a rival, but
Also,
pulling himself to +3. Okay, so now we've got to come up with something extra special here.
I just see that Pog
Benjamin.
has drawn his game against Seirawan,
Mm-hmm.
so that probably the line that we just looked at happened in the game, and they agreed to
A
draw in the king pawn ending.
Well, I don't really have many good suggestions here. This looks just hopeless to my eyes.
I mean,
If you, not necessarily because of G4, but
I would
just
go Rook G3 or something like that.
right. Rook G3, Rook F3. I mean, it's 2 pawns.
Mm-hmm.
You're ready to set up with Queen G6. And by the way, those pawns nicely defend the king as
Yeah.
well. I mean, it really cuts out.
I mean,
Any
there are even
perpetuals.
more. Like you mentioned,
Bad
Queen
news.
to G6 is actually a horrible move to face, because we're just threatening to put one of the rooks on the 7th, especially Rook to D7,
Yes.
and just you can't even protect
Play with Rook
G7.
Right.
So not only are you 2 pawns down, you're also close to getting mated already.
Right. I remember listening to Peter Svidler doing a commentary
Mm-hmm.
of the Anand game, where he says, where the questioner says, "Well, how are you going to protect G7?" Magnus
Mhm.
plays Rook to the 7th. Vichy resigned, and Peter said, "You're not. You're not." I was like,
Okay.
very definitive. Yeah.
So
Wow.
looks like Fabi has managed to put a lot of pressure on Ding Liren, and he's not cracking.
Mm.
Once again, though, like I said, I really think that Fabi, in this game, for example, we felt like he was losing it a little bit,
Mhm.
but somehow he managed to keep the pawn and keep the pressure, or get some pressure on Ding,
Mhm.
and he didn't allow him to equalize in any straightforward fashion, and somehow he manages to pull a win out of a position that really wasn't so impressive to us anymore.
Right. Somehow, maybe way back in these parts,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as attractive as the move D3 looks, it somehow loses something here.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that, but again, the stupid H5 pawn, it really sticks out. If you don't play D3, well, you're just taking a pawn and what have you. So
Yes, I have
Yes,
a bit
please.
of a strange question, but you remember Fabiano playing that move H4 and us saying, what in the
Way
world?
back
What in the
on.
world is he doing, right?
Right.
H4, and it seems as though
it was
Black has
way
played
back.
Black has played in this position when we said B5 or pretty much any other move made sense except H4.
Even F6, yeah.
But where in the world has Black decided to play H5? Because I remember he went F6.
Yeah.
And it seems like a very odd choice. I'm not sure where and why. H5 in this position. I mean,
Agreed.
it's always funny. It's always easy to say it in hindsight, of course.
Definitely.
But it does seem like a very strange move to play.
Especially with queens on the board, right?
Uh-huh.
You would almost think that Black would play queen takes D3 and play H5, or
Mm-hmm.
but if with queens on the board, you'd think H6. So this is where things really.
Maybe that's sort of the beginning of some trouble for for Ding.
Well, again, here we thought Queen D7
Yes.
was the
Was the right way.
most
Tenacious.
Yeah,
let's say.
tenacious. Yes, thank you. Yeah, and suddenly, Ding Liren is now in trouble as Rook takes D3, the move, and he has played Rook C8.
Mhm.
rook d8 to c8. And dare we ask the question?
What if we take the pawn?
Yes. Upon my word. Check. What else?
Yeah, let's go for it. And I'm assuming...
We pause. Yeah, because we can play rook d1. We just pause for a moment.
I was about to say I'm assuming that white will go rook d1, but...
Oh, you're assuming rook d1.
Because...
if we trade...
I mean, actually trading, why would that be a mistake? It just felt like the safer thing to do, but... Queen e5 and just... Well, I mean, g3 looks fine as well. We're threatening mate.
That threat is landing like a ton of bricks, isn't it?
It looks like a very normal position with white just being 2 pawns up.
And by the way, queen takes h5 has been played. So this is certainly very good. And your knee-jerk reaction of just keeping the first rank well protected also
seems to be
2 pawns.
Fine, yes.
So Fabiano gets a chance 2 pawns ahead to show his fabulous technique. No, this is
this looks like it's done.
This looks like one. And we have a tweet, our hashtag Tata Steel Chess from Pavel. I lost, but it was a good game today. The one you can learn from as I was overestimating my position almost all the time. Smiley face.
Well, I feel that comment because
very
like
much
I said,
so.
I think we both overestimated white position too.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sort of captures our thoughts as well. Yeah.
We feel your pain, Powell. Absolutely. I mean, for sure.
That's the hard thing about playing against the world's best, I suppose. You can't always trust your intuition.
Right. And if it was just finely calculated that Magnus realized he was taking some risks, but he found a very effective plan of dealing with what looks like a tidal wave of pawns, right? You'd almost like to take that pawn on c6 and draw it back to c4 and then, push them softly, But he didn't have that. And, again, this very nice mix that Magnus achieved of provoking his opponent on the one hand, and forcing, Pavel out of, let's say, a zone of comfort. He goes for a sacrifice that looks very enterprising and in some ways attractive, and Magnus found all the precise moves.
Yeah. And also, let's not forget, Magnus' opening play was very interesting, and I mean, I have never seen g5, knight e4, knight d6. Like, this is all like a new language to me.
Yes.
And I've seen a lot of openings, and I'm sure you've seen even much more. But that was a very interesting concept, and if he manages to play these interesting lines, surprise his opponent, and just give them that chance to take a risk, and then defend as accurately as he did today, then.
There was one model game. Ulf Andersson became the 3rd highest rated player in the world behind Kasparov and Karpov at the time. And Ulf Andersson, he is very solid Queen's Gambit declined player. And I was very impressed that he made this maneuver. He put his knight on e4, as black in a Queen's Gambit decline, Cambridge Springs structure. And then at one moment he played knight on e4 back to d6, and this knight was like phenomenal. It stopped this minority attack.
Exactly.
f5, f4 came, but Ulf didn't play it with g5.
Because Kasparov played it against, I think it was, Kasparov won several games in the Karlsblad structure, right?
Yes.
With the knight on d6 going g5, h5.
And getting him,
I wrote about that myself once before.
So,
I used it.
Wow, like you say, a new language by Magnus. What games do we have? Is the Wii game still in progress?
It looks like a little bit of something is happening here, but once again,
what is that something? He's trying
to bring the king over.
some position where Zugzwang might be possible. I don't exactly see. Well, I mean, Wesley's dream is to
Get the pawn ending, of course.
obviously, yeah.
The problem is that as long as white doesn't go for this, and he just keeps the king on e4 and d4, there's absolutely no way to get black's king any closer than it is now. And I think that's really the big struggle for black is how can you improve your position?
Right, you've kind of maximized the position. In the Northwest, we talk about the Zook point. The Zook point was a fellow Robert Zook, and he was very well known in the Northwest as a player who put his pieces in the maximum position, but then can't improve any further. Right? So black has kind of reached a Zook point. He's put his pieces as best he possibly could, I mean, including his pawns, by the way, and can't go further.
Yeah.
Back to how are the challengers? Do we have?
Yeah, let's have a look. There are still some games going on there, games that we haven't necessarily looked at yet. So let's have a look at
the all-lady.
Nino Batshashvili against Zhu Wenjun, the all-lady encounter. Yeah, and
rook
we have
endings.
another. And from what I understood, there's pretty much only rook endings going on right now. We still have another Dutch clash today between Jordan van Vereest and Erwin Lamy. That might be a rook ending as well to look at. But here it looks like we might have a rook ending that is, well, I'm glad that you're sitting next to me, yes.
And likewise, Robert. Do you protect me from embarrassing myself? Okay, black might... First impression is black should be winning.
And that's what I thought, because the king is cut off on the f-file, right? That's one of the
that's a very, very key point is that, oops, the king is cut off, the white king is cut off from this very dangerous pass pawn, so that my first impression is that you can play, rook checks and king back. Let's just see how the game progressed. Check, check, back. And we're here. Oh, well, this is simple then. Thank you very much. Let's take a pawn. Thump. This is resigns, as we understand it.
Yeah, because the two
because
pawns
it's
together
two
will
pawns.
win. Yeah. I mean, if it's one, I will go king f2 and it will be okay. But this is a bit too much. Right?
This is one too many, and
it looks like a straightforward
win for Wenjun. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have
another games in progress.
Oh, another rook ending over here. We're looking at the game Abbasov versus Admiral, and it looks like
what do we got? Bishop b4.
It's like
thump.
We're just tuning in when a lot of exchanges are about to take place.
Are we about to see a 4 rook ending?
It looks
this
like
would
it.
be.
I think queen takes e6 has to be played, and
this looks like. Oops, maybe I did it wrong. I apologize. I should probably.
But isn't this a very tricky position, Yasser? Because rook a2, I would go for, and then first white goes rook a2, I think, rook a4 and rook c2, maintaining the rook behind the pawn, right?
Right.
The best way to push your pass pawn.
Now, from the Alexander Alekhine, Jose Raul Capablanca match, when it's 3 versus 3 with a rook behind, there's some very, very nice wins. How you're supposed to play model games. So we get a passive rook, yeah? We get the passive rook. And how to win this with 3 versus 3. Still tricky, but winning, right? But with the 3 versus 2, I'm thinking it's closer to draw. Of course, you want to be white. You're having the fun.
Right.
But it's very hard.
And the best strategy for black is to just start pushing his kingside pawns as soon as possible, or should he run to the a pawn first?
Well, Well, first of all, maybe it's the tempo. Okay, so I blew it right from the very beginning, the get-go. We were here and this is fine. I should go all the way back. Yeah?
Okay.
So that after the possible. It just means that when you're coming with your king all the way up the board,
a bit further.
You're not getting the tempo from the get-go, you know? Having said all of that, this is really a fast king, and it just so happens
that the pawn is already protected.
I'm going to keep the 4 rooks on the board. I wouldn't do this.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, for example, rook a takes b4, or rook d takes b4 as well.
Much better.
Oh, and we
better.
have rook b2 check.
Rook b2. Well,
after rook a2, obviously.
yes. Pardon me. The pawn is being attacked. This is just a dead draw. Sorry.
This is much better.
Much
better.
We made Black's life very, very difficult for him, but this is actually just a dead draw.
Hold on. If I go a6 over here, can I still try to do something over here, or is it... you're just exchanging a rook immediately. Yeah, that's probably easy.
I'm getting
hoping for something on the 7th rank with white.
Exactly. I'm getting my rook just in time to get behind the pawn.
Right. Yeah.
Oof. Okay.
So let's...
Back to the Masters.
We still have one game that I would briefly like to look at.
Oh,
it's
yes.
the all-Dutch encounter of... well, yes.
It really is.
Please continue your lecture.
Yes.
I'm learning something as well. So.
It really is a day for rook endings, isn't it? When this one is lost.
But that is very interesting because Jordan is actually playing as black. That means that he's about to beat one of the strongest players in the Netherlands.
Right.
And he's had some very good results, but I'm not sure how his record is against, let's say, the other top Dutch grandmasters. Now, if he's...
he had a match with Hans Ray and maybe somebody else very recently, right? It wasn't Timon.
Yeah, he's had a match with Timon that I think he lost.
Yes,
with half
recently.
Point difference. And
then it was Hans Ray when he was really much younger.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he's played Benjamin Bok as well as Erwin Lamy several times now. I've only played him twice. I beat him the last time, which was I think last year. But
get him while they're young.
Beating Erwin with black though, I mean
That's a big breakthrough.
I have never done that before. For example, Erwin is very solid as white and very well prepared. So let's have a look. I mean, I think what I like about Jordan is that, kind of like Anish, he plays a lot of different openings. I don't think he's as well prepared or as knowledgeable as Anish was at the same age. I mean, it's very hard, but he's a very good player. And from what I've seen, he can be a bit impatient when it comes to technical endings. But if he really, if he really puts his mind to it, then he is completely capable of winning difficult endings. Now, I think actually this one he should be able to manage because he's going to bring his king over to the queen side, obviously.
Right.
And then normally what white does is he will try to get the king behind the a-pawn. Am I right?
Yeah.
And create some counterplay. But, okay, king f4 will be played, right?
Clear.
King e6, and they're going to walk all the way to the c-file, I guess.
Right. Everybody comes over.
And now black is going to make some sort of waiting move, like perhaps rook to a8, or I'm not sure which one's the best.
Just, like you say, a waiting move for the time being?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter if white makes moves on the king side now, because there's one thing that I'm always curious about. Of course, you can study how to win these endings, and it's very important, but also, are there techniques that are known, ways to increase your chance of drawing these kind of positions?
Yes.
Because there are ideas for white, of course.
Definitely. There are definitely good ideas. The principle is actually to keep your pawns here. You might be inclined to think, well, I'll just keep my pawn here, but actually now you're allowing king f3, and I remember that Alakine actually sacrificed his a-pawn to force f4 and g3, and then brought his king in. Yeah? So in this position, it would be a mistake, for example, to go like this, because then your king allows the king to go the other way. So,
and the pawns will become very weak in the long run.
Right, and suddenly the king is getting in here. So your best defensive setup is to do nothing. New main variation. Yeah. and then after, say, king b5, is to keep like this, right? So if you get a3 check, and then you try to just hold, and especially for, we'll put the rook on a decent square. Yeah? You don't really ever want to play g3 or f3. You just here. And there was a game from the Kasparov-Karpov match that Bobby Fischer was very interested in. In Bobby's opinion, every move of every game of every match was predetermined.
Right?
And Anatoly Karpov adjourned in a rook ending that transposed to a problem.
Really?
Okay, yeah, that was published in the Russian 64. Hey, Anish.
Anish is showing up and now running away very quickly.
Oh, very clever man.
I was about to ask him some questions about a rook ending, but I know that he is very similarly minded towards them as I am. So
actually, Anish, because that, well, okay, he's disappeared because we're so.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. It's wonderful. It's nice to get good help. Good help is hard to find. So. The point again is just to try to keep these pawns backwards and not to fix them. And from Black's point of view, you can't really make progress. You can give me checks and stuff. You're basically forced
to play f5. I was about to ask him.
And this is your only real method of play, f5, and only when you've played f5, right? So. Now what do we do?
I guess I'll have to go with rook f3 at some point, right? Or rook, or rook to the d file, I'm not sure.
Yes, you don't want to play g3. Again, you really want to avoid these type of moves. Excuse me? Escape?
No,
okay,
just
cancel. So maybe... Well, no, here you're not in time.
Right.
I apologize. Here I have to go at like this, right? Here, here, and probably this move. So again, you want as Black, now this is a very nice setup. This is kind of the thing that I think you want to do.
And then basically you want to create that imbalance, like I'm going to get the h-pawn as a passed pawn and white will end up with basically a bad pawn on f2, right?
Right. And I remember, who was it? I was analyzing with somebody, some very strong grandmaster. We were we were trying to win A and H pawns against nothing, right? So it's 2-pawn advantage.
Yeah.
But the defender had a good rook.
Okay.
Right? And it was really
tough
I
stuff,
think it was actually Pal Benko. Oh, Pal. Oh. I think that he is one of the really great resources in American chess. And I just a shout out to all of those who make the DVDs. Somebody's got to take Pal and sit him down and just let him talk about rook and pawn endings for like 15 hours and then edit the videos and
make something great out of it. Huh?
It's profoundly beautiful.
Okay.
Like the concepts that he came up with were, well, it's just really exhilarating. And he's really a wonderful resource to have. Anyway, this is actually, I hope, as you say, Jordan plays very well and technically.
I'm going to just quickly have a look at where they're at. They're still in this position, so perhaps we'll have a quick peek later on. This is going to still take a little while. Okay. The one thing I can say is that it could very well be that the things you just explained, that's something that Erwin knows about, because I know he likes to study endgames. He's very good at them.
He does.
So I would not be that surprised if Erwin one way or another manages to hold it. But of course it would be a big a big surprise, because this is well known to be kind of a lost position.
Right.
Going back to some of the games that are still going on, we still have. Do we have anyone playing in the A group?
How about Wesley?
How about Wesley? Indeed. Looks like Wesley is stuck in the same.
Not much has happened. The Zook point has been reached.
And it doesn't look like Wesley is. He doesn't look like a guy who was about to win
No, he doesn't
difficult ending.
No. I think Wesley's trying to give his opponent an opportunity to play h4. Not necessarily that loses, but
No,
at
just,
least
you know,
then he can
yeah.
get his rook behind.
Give it some sort of margin for error, right?
Yes. And it looks like repeating. Rook f3, is that on the board?
Yeah.
It's always frustrating, right? When you have some kind of an edge and your opponent just holds it, just holds it.
Yes, what do you think about, actually, because I have the feeling that Wesley would not play on for so long against some of the other players in the field. Do you think that he's sort of showing Wei like, well, you're kind of holding on this time, but just know that if there was a slight chance, I would be playing it all night against you. Like, he's just sort of setting the tone for future battles that are surely going to follow, right?
There's a lot to be said about that yes, these players are likely to be rivals for the next 10 years against one another. You'd like to get the psychological upper hand and beat them when they're young. I think there's something else going on here with Wesley as well. It's annoying when you get as much as a 1 hour time advantage, that you want to exploit that extra to show your opponent shouldn't get himself short of time. So to keep the problems alive, so to speak.
How do you actually feel about Wesley being up an hour on the clock, which is, I mean, it's really quite a lot of time. I don't think I see that in every round, especially at this level. We've seen sort of the entire game as it went, and for a very big part of it, it was kind of, slowly but surely becoming more and more equal and more dry. And somehow Wei Yi has spent actually a tremendous amount of time on the whole process of getting to this slightly worse ending. Do you think that is a sign that he's perhaps not so much in shape, or is it just, being young and playing against guys like Wesley, he's double-checking everything a little bit more?
No.
Is there something to be said for that, or is it just perhaps it was actually a difficult position to play?
Yeah, it's probably a combination of everything you mentioned. One of the things that happened just to help the non-American audience, it was like the year 2014. And really, this was the year of Wesley So.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, it was a coming out party, the likes of which we haven't seen in a long, long time, besides just winning the Millionaire Open in cruising fashion, by the way. Wesley was winning everything. It was like the collegiate champion, Webster team.
Every single American Open as well.
Everything he and I do think the players are still continuing, and the players have finally agreed to a draw.
Yeah.
But Wesley played in what we call the U.S. Chess League, which is actually an internet where the players go to a club and they're supervised, so there's no hanky-panky, right? And Wesley had something like a 9-0. He led the St. Louis Archbishops to a championship. And there was a game that he played against Holt, I believe, from the Dallas Dynasty, right?
Yeah, Conrad Holt.
Very, very decent grandmaster, U.S. champion, competitor. And Wesley played, I think, in about 7 minutes. I mean, it was like Wesley just played like it was like a young Vishy Anand, where he played the whole game incredibly quickly. So Wesley actually has a fast tempo, and especially when he's aware of the position, comfortable, knowledge about the position, and he uses it to great effect to put pressure on his opponent and get them into time trouble. And he counts on his opponent getting into time trouble. And sometimes he has a hard time slowing himself down. Perhaps way earlier, when he got to a position like this, I'm not saying that he had given up on the game or anything of the type, but I think that he probably played this move, Rook A1, rather too quickly. If he had just stopped and considered the position, I think he would have played King H5 and found a way to really keep more pressure in the position. By the way, Wesley is one of those guys, when you ask me what his weakness is,
not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
he's good in like all phases of the
Right,
game. He's
yeah.
shown some great technique.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about the candidates, I was going to say about the candidates, really, I see them all as having very, very, very good chances. This is a really balanced field. You could throw Wesley into that field and Vladimir Kramnik as well,
Yeah.
and you're still keeping this remarkable balance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Wow. Continue with this one. Still 2 pawns.
Yeah.
Ding Laren. Well, how would you approach it? You're 2 pawns up. So you're saying to your opponent, come on, Ricky, be a sport, resign. Do you go for G4, G5?
I was going to say I'm going to go for G4, G5.
You would.
I would
because
just
you do take a slight risk that you're exposing your king. And maybe there's not,
It's just that, yes, when the guy puts his queen on f7 and his king on h7, I can't be stopped, I'm going to play G4, G5. It's just...
It's like a magnetic understanding.
Exactly.
Yeah, but you don't, first, try to worm your way to the back rank.
Well, maybe that would be the mature way of going about things. But
sometimes you test your opponent a little bit because it's one of those things that basically Ding is going to be moving back and forth for some time. Having said all of this, where is Black's chances to hold? It's not a rook ending. Is there a queen ending chances?
Well, the one thing that always sticks out to me, and I was just briefly thinking about this in the game of Arniche as well, is that you have those strange positions that I personally never really understood, where, let's say one party has 2 pawns, like a G and an H pawn, and a queen, and the other side only has a queen, and let's say all the pieces are on one side, and it's somehow, theoretically speaking, a draw in some cases.
Yes.
One of the most, bizarre endgames in the whole game, I would say. So, is there a slight chance of a draw?
It's got to be in the queen ending.
Then it's in the queen ending.
That's right.
Yeah.
And just to buttress this, new in chess readers will nod their head appreciatively. There was a queen ending that Vishy Anand had where it looked like it was very easy to win, and he had some real troubles. And then John Nunn, with this database, 4-piece, 5-piece database,
table base,
had discovered a position just as you described: a queen and 2 pawns, connected pawns, versus nothing except a queen, and it was drawn. The computer would draw it against the best grandmasters in the world.
Amazing.
And it was really a revelation. So. Yeah, as Black, okay, you're suffering, it's terrible, terrible. Your job is to make it as difficult as possible for your opponent to beat you. Well, maybe trading rooks is your best chance. Something just got traded, by the way. I don't
it does not look like a queen.
It doesn't look like a rook. It actually looks like a queen.
That's odd to me that he went for that exchange, but perhaps there was a direct idea with rook a8 that he was worried about.
Probably.
I don't quite see it. Queen to f8, for example.
Okay. Oops. Queen to f8, for example. Rook tickles.
Rook to c8, I think I have to play.
This is...
And then rook a7.
Yes.
I mean, clearly White is going to win this, but perhaps it's a better way of sort of...
Defending. Yeah, well, again, it's like one of those things, how can you make it as difficult as, to put as many problems in front of your opponent as you can.
But at the same time, I mean, in this position, for example, queen f7 coming, like you're
It's going to be very hard to avoid the queen trade after queen f7.
Who's going to stop you, right?
Right. All right, let us see what has happened, because the queens have come off. And rook to e4. Wow, f3.
f3, g4, I guess.
f3, g4, and slowly we're cozying up, and
we're about to play maybe rook d6 and g5 or rook d8 and g5.
Yeah, setting up some mating nets.
Exactly.
Oops. Yeah.
It looks fairly
straightforward.
Straightforward
actually.
to
Yes,
maneuver.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we get prepared to wrap up, let's just recall what has happened in this round so far.
Mm-hmm.
We had Magnus Carlsen in fine form, outplaying a very strong Grandmaster of Pavel Elyanov.
Mm-hmm.
Shaq getting an opportunity to shine
Right.
against Wu Yifan.
Yeah,
and
showing his tactical abilities in those complicated positions again.
right, and rather a big setback, I was going to say, because I have really admired what Wu Yifan has managed to do through 6 rounds. Really extraordinary.
Very, very good results. Yeah.
Right. Anish Giri recovering,
Mhm.
clawing his way back in the tournament with now a win and +1.
+1 again. Yeah.
Very good. +1. It's a new experience.
Yeah,
I mean, he had been -1
right.
the whole event.
Absolutely.
We hanging on to a draw against Wesley So, Afghani.
Keeping his all draw streak going for now.
Right.
Which,
We always think of talented juniors as being, up and down, right?
Mhm.
But this guy is like rock
Well.
solid. I mean, again, you mentioned Qatar, and maybe he's just keeping the wound.
Yeah.
But should Fabiano win with his 2-pawn advantage, it will draw him up to +3, which will leave at this moment at the halfway point as a 2-horse race.
Yes. Yeah. And that's gonna be very exciting. I wouldn't know who to pick, Yasser. Of course, Magnus is always the big favorite, but I like what I'm seeing from Fabiano. He's not maybe playing necessarily games that are just straightforward good wins, but he's fighting, and he, like today, I mean, it's still an admirable win, supposing that he's gonna win. Just like I said, keeping that pressure and not allowing his opponents any easy escapes from slightly worse positions.
Right.
And if you can beat 27, 60 players in that style, then you're onto something.
Yes.
So
yes.
it's
Yes,
gonna be
yes.
a very exciting race between the two of them.
Right. And we're just thinking, jumping way ahead of ourselves. You mentioned that Fabiano is one of those players, when he does play Magnus, he's not backing down, and he's really giving Magnus good as he gets. Anish Giri would also be another one of those challengers, should it happen, that, well, he's the only top player with a plus score
Exactly.
against Magnus. So
and that's still...
very good. So let us see. We do have the standings of we will expect that Fabiano wins. Magnus Carlsen looking good with +3. Fabi likely to join with +3. Anish Giri now with +1. Dean Lane likely to fall back to +1. Wesley So, undefeated, very nice, +1, hanging in there, but now being distanced as the players jump to +3. Hu Yifan dropping to 50%, along with Sergei Karyakin.
And I believe that Mamedyarov is back at 50% now.
Yes. And just thinking once again about his game against Elyanov, he would have been right up there. He mentioned that this, I believe, is his 4th Wijk aan Zee, and before this tournament, he only won 1 game in Wijk aan Zee.
Okay, well
against
then
Luke Van Velde. So he went to Luke and he said, if I don't beat you, I have no chance in the tournament. But he has chances, as we see.
Yeah.
Pavel, 50%, 2 wins, 2 losses. David Navarro mixing it up with some fantastic chess is not, unfortunately,
not been rewarded for it yet.
For his great enterprising play, -1. We 50%.
Yeah.
Tomaszewski, the Russian champion, suffering, along with Luke Van Velde and Mickey Adams.
Yes.
So, well, I think this is a very good time to say, Robin, it's great. It's great to have, and you'll join us tomorrow.
I will still be there tomorrow. Absolutely.
Very good,
Yeah.
and I know that Judith Polgar is in town, and I'm trying to drag her onto the show. She's doing a lot of book signings.
That would be great. Yeah,
Judith.
Well, Yasser, I hope we're going to have just as an exciting day tomorrow as it was today. Honestly, I was very entertained with the games. We had some draws as well, obviously, but most games were very fighting games, very interesting. I'm excited for tomorrow.
Very good. Well, I hope you are too, and I hope you will join with us. in the meanwhile, wishing you a good evening, signing off for
Thank
Robin
you.
and I.
Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Very good.